Hey everybody, welcome to Chapter 4, Section 2, where we are looking at the first of several of our body senses that we'll be discussing, our vision. So, before we get started, please make sure that we have all our distractions put away and are paying attention, that we have any notes out that we need to take that will help us along the way to keep track of what we're doing. And finally, if you have any questions, as always, please put them down in the comments box below. Let me know what you think, anything that I might have messed up on, or you want to add to the conversation. Again, that's a great place to do that. So, with that, let's get into our discussion here. So, main idea, light interacts with the eye, allowing us to see. And people with normal vision can adapt to these changing of the light conditions that can see any color of the spectrum of visible light. So those are the two concepts we'll be looking at particularly today, on how the eye lets us see this light and then what our eyes do with that information. So just with any other section we talk about, we got our terms. So today our first term is pupil, the opening of the eye that allows light to get in. That is that black hole part of our eye. We'll talk more about that. The lens, which is just behind the pupil, which is part of the eye that focuses the image to make the image clear for us. Basically, the lens helps us with nearsightedness or farsightedness. The retina is the interior surface of the eye that acts kind of as the film, which receives the image that passes through the pupil and passes through the lens. We'll certainly be talking more about that. Photoreceptors are the neurons that make up the retina that help us to receive the information of that light information. Our blind spot is the place of our where the optic nerve connects to the eye, where there are no photoreceptors. So where the light touches this particular area, those parts that information is not sent to the brain because there's no photoreceptors there. And again, we'll talk about that along with everything else. Visual acuity, it's a measure of how sharp our vision is, how good our vision is. We're going to look at complementary colors, colors that are opposite of one another on the color wheel or the color circle, and how that affects our vision in some ways. And we'll be talking a little bit about what's called an afterimage, the visual impression that remains after the original image has been removed. And we'll do a little experiment with that. So first off, volunteer, since this is a video, everybody gets to participate in this one. What I need you to do is from your screen that you're seeing right now, take about a distance of about 20 feet away from your screen. For most teenagers, that's about, we'll say about 6 to 7 full-length steps away, which gets you about 20 feet away. And then turn around and look at your screen. And what I want you to do is cover your right eye, like this, and see if you can read these letters. Top to bottom, left to right, with that right eye covered at about 20 feet away. And when you're done, do the same thing covering the left eye. It's almost kind of like you're back in grade school doing that eye test you had to do. So take a second, do that little activity, and see how you did. All right, so as you all know, this is just a simple eye check just to see how good our vision is. This is a typical test that the eye doctor will perform to check on whether you're nearsighted or farsighted and how good your vision is. This test allows us to kind of determine what range of vision each eye is. Is your eye 20/20 or 19/20 or however range that works. And each eye has its own independent way of looking at things. So even though we have two eyes and we use them together, each eye gets tested separately because one eye might be a little off from the other eye. And that's why we cover the eyes to try and figure out which eye is what type of visual acuity is stronger or weaker or whatever. So just a little bit of an easy warm-up activity to get us into our topic today. So, in order to understand about how our eyesight works, we have to understand about light, because light is what our eyes see. So light, simply put, is an electromagnetic energy that is described in wavelengths. Some of this electromagnetic light is visible to humans, only a small portion of it. Okay, the reds, the greens, the blues, the violets, a very small part of the spectrum of the electromagnetic light spectrum is actually visible to us people. Okay, sunlight can be broken down into different parts using a prism, kind of like we see in the picture here. Short waves and long waves. Okay, short waves are the reds, and the long waves are like the reds and the violets. It is our eye that takes those waves and allows us to make sense of it, to give our brain some sort of imagery to relate to what those waves mean. So our eyes are able to view those light waves within a certain range of frequencies. As the light enters the pupil, which is this black section of the eye here, it goes through the lens and is detected by the photoreceptors that are attached to the retina on the inside of the eyeball, here in the back part of the eyeball. These photoreceptors are what transmits the signal to the optic nerve on the back of the eye, and that sends it to your occipital lobe in your brain. Okay, as we talked about before, there's the difference between perception and sensation. Okay, so your eyes provide the sensation, but it's the optical lobe that provides the perception, that takes the visual information and tries to understand what it is that we're looking at. Photoreceptors are not inside all parts of the retina. Okay, looking at this picture here, we can see in the big red arrow here what's known as the blind spot. It's where the eye is connected to the ocular nerve. Since there are no nerves or photoreceptors where this nerve attaches to the eye, whatever light touches that area is not sensed by the eye. There's no photoreceptors there. And because there's no photoreceptors there, any light that hits that spot does not get transmitted to the brain. That's what's known as your blind spot. Every person has one because, again, we don't have any photoreceptors on that part of our retina. So that's what we call a blind spot. If you've ever heard the phrase before, it's not just a blind spot of where you're driving your car, but you actually do have a real biological blind spot in your eye. And now you know where it is. Now, back to photoreceptors. There are two types of photoreceptors that are attached to the retina inside our eye. The first kind are called rods. The second type are called cones. The rods, as we see here in the picture, are these long, gangly looking green things that allow us to see black and white light. Okay. The cones are these more purplish ones here that we see. They allow us to see color, which is pretty cool. You'll notice that there are a lot more rods than there are cones. When we get back into the eye, we have to talk about a couple different aspects of it that our eyes are able to understand and interpret. So what's called is light to dark adaptation occurs when the pupil of the eye gets bigger or smaller, depending on how much light is needed for the photoreceptors to detect the light. An easy way to explain this is you ever wake up in the middle of the night, it's dark out, and then you turn the light on and you get blinded? That's because your pupil is really large. That black pupil is really large, trying to let in as much light as possible in order for the photoreceptors to detect what it needs to see. It needs more light. Well, open up the pupil to get more light in. And once that light switch turns on, it's too much light. And your eye gets blinded by that, or your receptors get blinded by that. You just cover your eyes because it's so bright. But after a few moments, you adapt to it, and your pupil starts to shrink. Not because of any particular reason that's bad, it's just your eye doesn't need that much light anymore. So it gets to the point where it goes, your pupil gets smaller to get in just the right amount of light. Sometimes our pupil can get to be like the size of a pinprick, and if it's really bright outside, that's still too bright. So sometimes it's important to have a pair of sunglasses just to try and help your eyes not struggle with the amount of light that it's letting in. Sometimes a lot of people that get headaches is because their pupils dilate wrong and let in too much light or too little light, and your optic lobe in the back, or occipital lobe in the back, is doing overtime trying to adjust for that, and that can cause headaches if you get too much or too little light from that eye strain. Visual acuity is all part of this too. That deals with how sharp a person's vision is. That whole idea of 20/20 vision, whether you're nearsighted or farsighted. Typically, people that are farsighted need more space between what they're looking at and themselves in order to see it clearly. So the farther away something is, the clearer they see it. Okay, as compared to a person who's nearsighted, has their best vision when it's up close and personal, like when you're reading a book or a computer right in front of you. They tend to see things a lot easier, um, those nearsighted people. New technologies have allowed people with visual acuity problems, such as nearsightedness or farsightedness, to get treatment on their lenses to allow them for fixing those nearsighted and farsighted problems. So check this out. So let's do a little eye test here. See how you do. Can you see the number that's kind of within this image here? How about this one? Can you find the number inside of it? Or this one? Or even this one? This is an eye test that they use to help people to find out if an individual is colorblind. So hopefully on the left side you'll see the number 74. The next one you'll see number 46, I believe, or sorry, 45. The third you'll see number 8, and the last one you'll see the number 5. Assuming you see these numbers perfectly clear, you are having great vision. You're not colorblind. Some people might have a little bit more difficulty than others, but depending on which colors you or which numbers you see or don't see, helps the doctor determine what type of colorblind you are. Let's take a little bit more look at this. So people with normal vision are able to see a variety of colors on the spectrum of light that humans are capable of seeing. We can't see all light, remember, but we are supposed to be able to see within a certain spectrum. The complementary colors are those colors that are opposite one another on the color wheel. We're going to see how this relates to why it's important in a moment here. But as you can see, we got the cooler colors like the violet, the red violet, the blues, compared to the warmer colors like the oranges and the yellows. Those are important. If ever you're doing like visual presentations, like this PowerPoint, it's important to use complementary colors when you're using background colors and foreground colors. In this case, the text and the background pictures. They should be opposite colors, not next to each, not adjacent colors, because it's easier for the eye to detect these opposites. It's easier for us to see like a white text on a black background, or vice versa, as compared to like a violet text on a blue background. It's a little bit more difficult for the eye. We can do it, it just isn't as easy. So that's how we can kind of relate complementary colors in regards to using PowerPoints or imagery and art and things like that. But our eyes also can play tricks on us, and we'll see that here in a second. An afterimage is what happens when you look at an object for a while, then look away and see the object still there briefly, but you see it in its complementary colors. Okay, so you look at an image for a long time, you look away and you still see that image, but the colors are reversed. And that's why we look at this complementary colors and how our eyes are able to adjust and see that. So let's do a little experiment here. Take a look at this image really close for about 30 to 40 seconds and focus right on that image. And when you're done, look away. If you have a white sheet of paper, you can look on the white sheet of paper, or just look away and see how you do. So pause the video for just a second, look at it for about 30 seconds, and then look away. And you'll see what I mean when we talk about complementary colors. All right. If the experiment worked the way it's supposed to, you should have seen the Union Jack flag, this flag here, in its red and white brilliance, and not this bluish black yellow. Okay. You can do the same experiment in your textbook. Actually, there's a picture of an American flag with its complementary colors, so that when you look away, you actually see the real red, white, and blue flag. So this is known as an after image. Again, your eyes playing tricks on you because the image is kind of temporarily burned into your eyes. But as you also notice that after a few seconds it starts fading and it goes away. That's how it's supposed to work. So, how does this all work with our color vision? So, as we talked about, cones are one of the two types of photoreceptors. Again, there's cones and there's rods. The cones are the ones responsible for colors. However, not cones, there are different cones for different colors. So even though you have multiple cones of photoreceptors, one cone is responsible for one color. Another cone is responsible for another color. So there are three types of colors that these cones can see individually: blue, red, and green. And based upon the intensity of those colors, our brain is able to take them, mix them up, and allows us to see shades of those different colors. You'll notice that these are not necessarily the primary colors that you might have learned about in art class, but these are the colors that our photoreceptors in our cone photoreceptors are able to see. When different cones detect their particular color at the same time, again, like I said, these are the different shades of colors that we see. The color vision of animals are much different than that of humans. Some have cones, some don't. Some have different amounts of cones. Some see some colors better than other colors. It just depends on the animal. Some animal cones are so sensitive that they can see more than just red, green, and yellow, to include other colors that humans can't see. Certain cones that are not functioning correctly or are absent might cause a person to become what's known as colorblind. If a person can see some colors but not others, they are considered usually to be partially colorblind. If a person can't see any colors because their cones are completely damaged or missing, then a person is said to be completely colorblind. Color blindness is almost always because of heredity or damage to the eye. If it's heredity, it's almost always in the men, which is interesting. Of all natural born colorblind people, 99% of them are male, where only 1% of them are female, which they're not exactly sure why exactly, but they do know that it is based on heredity. It's a trait that gets passed down from father to son. So something to be thinking about here as we get older, and looking at our vision. Fortunately, there is new technology that has allowed people to see color that they might not be able to see in the past, which is pretty cool. And it's becoming more and more affordable for people to get these glasses, as we'll see an example in a minute, to be able to see these colors that they've never seen before. And these technologies is just getting better and better as time goes on and on. Eventually, hopefully, there'll be a treatment or a procedure to actually fix our physical eyes and not have to wear some type of glasses or other type of object to allow us to see better. But technology just in the last 7 years has been amazing, allowing people to see things that they've never seen before, because we've gotten a better understanding of how the eye works. Let's take a look at one of these examples of a gentleman who's never seen certain colors before.
Wow. That is very. He looks like a robot. That's why orange.
Yeah, this is look at their hair. It's red.
You okay?
I never saw this before. I never saw you color hair before. It's awesome looking. It really is. I never saw this. It's so bright.
So, what did we learn today? We talked about on how light is described as wavelengths that our eyes are able to detect within a certain range of the color spectrum. Our eyes are able to see a limited amount of this light frequencies, and we see them in the form of color. Our eyes consists of pupils, lenses, retinas, and photoreceptors. There are two types of photoreceptors that we talked about, the rods and the cones, that allow us to see black and white as well as color. Each cone that our eyes are able to see can either see a red, a blue, or green color, but not a combination of both. Remember, each cone can only see one of those colors. And if any of those particular cones are damaged, if it's a blue cone or a red cone, then it might indicate a person has some sort of color blind issue that needs to be checked. Our visual acuity tells us how well we are able to see at certain distances to determine our vision quality, whether we're nearsighted or farsighted. And new technologies such as LASIK surgery and chroma glasses have allowed us to, or have allowed people to see or overcome some of these eye problems that they have, whether it's nearsightedness or color blindness. So with that, we are done with our discussion for the day. I hope you got some information you'll find useful about how our eyes work and how light works. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to put your comments down below in the comments area, or if you have a comment or a suggestion, put it there as well. And with that, I'm done. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you again for our next section when we talk about our hearing in section 3. So with that, see you later. Have a great day.